Since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, Israel was among the very few major players in the global economy that did not impose sanctions on Russia. That must mean that the two countries are friendly and support each other, right? Not exactly. In 2022, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs not only accused Israel of supporting the neo-Nazi regime in Kiev, but the minister himself said this. Yes, those are the words of the person responsible for all Russian foreign policy. But wait, there is more. The Russian president is also very concerned about people's Jewishness.
Он уже не Анатолий Борисович Чубайс, а Маше Израилевич какой-то живет там. Зачем вы это делаете?
Anatoly Chubais was a high-ranking Russian official since the 90s who quit and fled Russia in 2022. And of course, Moshe Israelovich, a degrading mockery of Chubais' Jewish heritage, is Putin's idea of a joke. Another notable quote from Putin was his thorough analysis of President Zelensky's Jewishness.
У меня много друзей, евреев с детства. Они говорят, Зеленский не еврей. Это позор еврейского народа. И это не шутка, не ирония, понимаете?
While the current intensification of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict became a full-fledged war, Putin, like a broken record, called it yet another failure of the US foreign policy. He said this when at least 16 Russians were confirmed dead and 8 remain missing as a result of the Hamas attack. Zelensky, however, had this to say.
За наявною інформацією дуже чіткою, Росія зацікавлена в розпаленні війни на Близькому Сході, щоб нове джерело болю та страждань послабило світову єдність, додало розколів та протиріч, і цим допомогло Росії знищувати свободу в Європі.
In this video, we will look at Russia's relationship with both Israel and Hamas and try to figure out Putin's interest in the new war in the Middle East. Up until Gorbachev's rule, the USSR was mostly antagonistic to Israel, had no diplomatic relations with it since 1953, and supported the Palestine Liberation Organization led by Yasser Arafat. The biggest reason for this preference was the popularity of the leftist politics in the PLO. Perhaps the only true link between the Soviet Union and Israel was Yevgeny Primakov, the Middle East correspondent for the Pravda newspaper, who also served as Prime Minister of Russia from 1998 to 1999. And interestingly, the President of the State of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, started under him. Diplomatic relations between Israel and the USSR were re-established in October of 1991, mere months before the collapse of the Union, and in 1993 the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel signed the peace treaty titled the Oslo Accords, Russia's involvement in which was purely symbolic. It was then that the PLO was split into two factions, Fatah and Hamas. Fatah are the successors of Yasser Arafat, and in 1993 they agreed to cease terrorist activity. Mahmoud Abbas is the current chairman of Fatah. Hamas is a radical Islamic organization that continued to fight Israel militarily and by means of terrorist attacks. In 2006, Hamas won the Palestinian legislative election, overtaking Fatah by 4% of the votes. In 2007, fearing a supposed retaliation from Fatah, Hamas took over the entirety of the Gaza Strip by force. Hamas accused the president, Mahmoud Abbas, of conspiring against it. There hasn't been another election held in Palestine since. Russian relations with Israel improved over the years. Israel became one of the main destinations for immigration from Russia. In 2005, Putin visited Jerusalem. During this official visit, he gifted a monument dedicated to the victims of the Holocaust to the nation of Israel. In 2008, both countries cancelled all visa requirements for each other's citizens. In 2018, the trade turnover between Russia and Israel totaled $502 million. However, while Israel obviously had a very strong reaction to Minister of Foreign Affairs Sergei Lavrov's statement regarding Hitler's lineage, that was not the only point of contention in 2022 alone. In July of that year, the Russian Ministry of Justice threatened to legally terminate the Jewish Agency for Israel, the main entity for repatriation. Israel's then Prime Minister Yair Lapid warned Russia that there would be serious consequences if such a decision was to be made. Here is how the Russian official attitude towards Hamas changed over time. In 1994, in response to Hamas abduction and killing of an Israeli soldier, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs came out with the following statement.
We are outraged by the inhumane crime of Islamic fanatics who murdered a young Israeli soldier taken hostage by the Palestinian organization Hamas. The perpetrators of this atrocity must be punished in the harshest possible terms. Additional steps must be taken to prevent further acts of terror by Hamas.
In 2004, Mikhail Margelov, chairman of the Federation Council Committee on International Affairs, issued this statement in response to the assassination of the Hamas leader Ahmed Yassin.
The assassination of Yassin by the Israeli military means that Israel's intelligence services are actually doing the good job of taking out terrorist groups for the Palestinian security agencies. Ariel Sharon risked sacrificing his political authority, unlike Yasser Arafat.
Interestingly, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had a polar opposite reaction to this event, condemning extrajudicial killing. The shift in rhetoric is complemented by Vladimir Putin's 2006 speech in Madrid, where he suddenly expressed support for Hamas, saying that Russia never recognized Hamas as a terrorist organization and, I quote, "Today, it must be recognized that Hamas came to power in the Palestinian Authority through democratic, legitimate elections, and the choice of the Palestinian people must be respected." At the same time, in 2011, Russia's attitude towards Hamas soured when the Palestinian militant organization supported the Syrian opposition against President Bashar al-Assad. In 2015, right before his death, Evgeny Primakov argued that Palestinian fighters ought to be condemned for their terrorist activity, but should not be labeled terrorists because they are, I quote, only responding to Israeli attacks of Palestinian civilians. In September of 2022, the Russian Foreign Affairs Minister met with Hamas political elite. They discussed the potential for an agreement between Hamas and Fatah. The Times of Israel also noted that this visit took place in a difficult time for Russian-Israeli relations. In October 2023, when Hamas attacked Israel, the very same Sergei Lavrov urged a ceasefire and called the status quo in the region unsustainable, ironic statements in light of Russia's war in Ukraine. Now we await the announced official visit of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, leader of Fatah, to Moscow, which is set to take place in the near future. Lastly, here is a sarcastic comment from Russia's top propagandists on the situation involving thousands of victims.
The events are unfolding so rapidly and so dramatically that no one even remembers the well-established stereotypes such as Israel is the safest and most secure country in the world, the might of IDF is uncontested, Mossad is the best intelligence agency in the world, the Iron Dome is indestructible, and the Israeli-made tank Merkava is invulnerable. Now, all these stereotypes have been blown away, like autumn leaves.
In short, Russia is not actively supporting either side, although its sympathies are clearly with Hamas.
We have to realize that from Russia's point of view, it likes a certain level of low-level chaos in the Middle East, shall we say, because it gives it leverage.
But as Mark Galeotti said in our interview with him, which we urge you to watch after this video, Russia will surely try to benefit from the situation. While most world powers typically benefit from aiding a side in any conflict, Russia wants to take a passive approach here. If the US and the EU are investing in a future for Ukraine by providing it with military and humanitarian aid, Russia doesn't care if there even is a future for either Israel or Palestine. And this is symptomatic of how Putin's government treats countries that view Russia as an ally utilitarian. Russia claimed to support Armenia, but just recently that support turned out to be a smokescreen. You might think that this is because Russia is so preoccupied with its war in Ukraine that it just couldn't shift its attention to Armenia and the recent Azerbaijan takeover of Nagorno-Karabakh. However, after the Armenia-Azerbaijan War of 2020, it was obvious that the situation in the region is unstable, and if Russia was to keep its promise to Armenia as a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, it ought to have paid attention to securing peace in the South Caucasus. Instead, Putin decided to multiply pain and suffering in the world by starting a full-scale war of his own in Ukraine. And this is exactly how Putin's Russia treats pacts, treaties, and agreements. It honors them only if it's convenient. And what is convenient for Russia in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is the fact that it has intensified once again. Russia needs this conflict to occupy the West's attention because the Kremlin hopes that it will leave Ukraine more vulnerable. Anything that hurts the West is considered beneficial by Moscow. Russia leans towards supporting Hamas because it is challenging Israel, an ally of the US, as well as because the Kremlin recently became close with Iran, the main sponsor of Hamas. Putin would like nothing more than for this conflict in the Middle East to be drawn out for as long as possible and for it to deal as much damage to the current world order as possible. After all, Putin always claims that he wants a new world order. Well, it seems that he already succeeded, except in a world that devolves into violence over territories and unresolved conflicts, Putin is still not a winner.